Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator, the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael, of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This particular presentation, brothers and sisters, we do not intend for it to be long. Nonetheless, brothers and sisters, we do intend to sit there and bring this out to the people for those who are interested. We hope and pray that everybody is well and will be better. Brothers and sisters, in this presentation, it is a history-based one. Now, some may wonder why to go into this upon the seventh day, the Shabbat. For more than one reason, we can. In the book of Deuteronomy, it says that Israel was brought up out of the land of Egypt. And part of the reason why the Sabbath was given was in commemoration of the Exodus. Now, of course, we know the Sabbath was in commemoration of the creation. So Israel, in truth, has a dual reason regarding the observance of the Sabbath. So I ask you all to get your pens, your pad, your paper, and to take notes, brothers and sisters. Again, we do hope and pray that everybody is well and will be better. This is mainly on the channel More Yeshaya, history lessons for those brothers and sisters who are interested in that particular case. All right, this is the first time for me putting it on my Facebook page through the StreamYard, so I hope everything goes well with that in that particular case. I want to, on a human level, give due respect to my lady who encourages me. We intended, brothers and sisters, to do this so-called Wednesday, brothers and sisters, but it didn't pan out that way because her and I had something to discuss. No drama, no, but rather a matter of encouragement that is often given and definitely appreciated. So, brothers and sisters, without any further ado, may we get into this particular presentation. Sorry about that. For those who are able to hear me well and are in good spirits, we ask you, brothers and sisters, to press the number 4. We ask you to press the number 4 in this particular matter, brothers and sisters. All right. So, giving honor to the Most High, this presentation is brought to you from Danite Publications. Please check the website with said name to see the list of books. We ask you all to comment, like, and subscribe. We hope and pray that you all are well and will be better. All right. So, brothers and sisters, without any further ado, we ask you to get your pens, your pads, your paper, and to take notes. Let us get into this. Now, the point in this, brothers and sisters, is to show the correspondence between what happened during the matter of slavery and letters that were given from one slave master to another. We have in times past, brothers and sisters, gotten into and did presentations concerning the matter of Washington, Jefferson, Madison, as well as the Continental Congress and their hand in the enslavement of our people. These are things, brothers and sisters, we do not intend to sit there and have it ignored. We do not intend, brothers and sisters, to have this to be forgotten. So, this guy that you see here is Thomas Jefferson, who had over, brothers and sisters, 600 of our ancestors as slaves. All right? He was born in 1743 when George Washington was 11 years old. And this is still during before the current United States, as we call it today, which was created in 1776. He died in 1826 on the anniversary of the 50th year of the United States becoming a quote country on July 4th. All right. So brothers and sisters, let us get into this and continue. Thank you for that. The guy that you see there, brothers and sisters, is George Washington, born in 1732 and passed away in 1799 at the age of 67. Born in Virginia, he fought in a Revolutionary War. Now, here's the interesting part with that. Many people may not know, and I say this in no disrespect to anyone, because one of the things as I despise when getting into presentations or history and so forth, when people attempt to come off as if to say, well, maybe you all don't know. No, let's not do that. Don't try to sit there and make yourself be as if you're the first one to present some kind of information. So you won't find from a brother on Day and Night Publications talking about this wasn't taught to you in school. You in school have the authority to go to the library and study things on your own. So that's not something that we need to sit there and say to one another. All right. George Washington had over 300 slaves, brothers and sisters. And we've gone over that in that particular case. In the 1760s, he used to sit there and trade black people off as slaves from one place in the United States to a place in the Caribbean of today. Another reason why we should not sit there and try to castigate, oh, you are Black American and they who are not from, quote, America are foreigners, when it's still part of the same continent. The United States of America, and this is not a secret, is not a country by default. It's a corporation. This is why you come over to the United States to sit there and not gain country, nation, family ties, but rather business and economics, because it itself is not a country, all right, by legal definition in that particular case. It is, as pointed out, more so a matter of a corporation, all right? And this is partly why the United States cannot have what you call a king in that case, all right? Because they have a president, a vice president, and according to international maritime law, you have to have a board of directors as well. Thus, Congress sits as that. You understand? So we hope and pray again that everybody is well and will be better. Let us continue in this. Again, this is the first time I'm doing this on YouTube and on my Facebook Live. So I'm able to sit there and see it in both particular matters as well. The Facebook page is Yeshaya Author Danite. All right. And the YouTube page, the main one being Motor Yeshaya History Lessons. All right. So just want to point that out for reference purposes. All right. This gentleman that you see there is John Jay. Now, John Jay was a person who, in the North, he was a slave master, brothers and sisters, and he was part of the Continental Congress. Now, we've gone over the Continental Congress that was in existence for, say, less than 20 years. And they, like the presidents of the United States, were enslavers of our people. Now, again, as pointed out, this is not to spark anger. This is not to spark rage, but it is to be presented for knowledgeable purposes. All right. Let us continue in this. Thank you, brothers and sisters. From Thomas Jefferson to George Washington, your favor of August 31st came to hand yesterday, and a confidential convenience offering by the way of London. I avail myself of it to acknowledge the receipt. Now, you're going to sit there and see within the PowerPoints different spellings, brothers and sisters, because when you are citing somebody else, you got to word it the way that it's worded in there. So I didn't bother to sit there and go through it to make it, quote, spelled correctly. All right. Just want to point that out. It was basically a matter from how they wrote to each other back in those days within the 18th and 19th centuries. Let's continue. I have seen with infinite pleasure our new constitution accepted by 11 states, not rejected by the 12th, and that of the 13th happens to be a state of the least importance. It is true that the minorities and most of the accepting states have been very respectable, so much so as to render it prudent, were it not otherwise reasonable, to make some sacrifice to them. I am in hopes that the annexation of the Bill of Rights to the Constitution will alone draw over so great a proportion of the minorities as to leave little danger to the opposition of the residue, and that this annexation may be made by Congress and the assemblies without calling a convention, which might endanger the most valuable parts of the system. Now, what system are we talking about? Now, remember, this is a letter from Thomas Jefferson, brothers and sisters, to George Washington. 11 years apart in birth and united in enslavement of our ancestors, before their presidency, during, and even after. You understand? Some people try to give Washington a quote pass by saying, well, he liberated and freed his slaves after, well, before his death, should I say. And I say this in no disrespect. What good is that? He got everything he could from the people whom he enslaved. And then on his deathbed, okay, I'll let you sit there and be free. Now, what can these freed people do in their own? Remembering that the United States is not a country per se, but a corporation. What rights do they have in this corporation of the United States of America? Virtually none. George Washington's nephew enslaved the people and sold them back into slavery after his death. And when you go on the presentation about Washington, in a presentation called Honoring of 12 Presidents and Ownership Part 1, you see that. All right? Shalom, my love. Shalom, Sarai. Shalom, my brother Yirmiyahu. Shalom, Man King 4. Shalom, Dorayahu. And shalom to everyone else in the chat. Thank you. Let's continue. Calculation has convinced me that circumstances may arise, and probably will arise, wherein all the resources of taxation will be necessary for the safety of the state. For though I am decidedly of opinion we should take no part in European quarrels, but cultivate peace and commerce with all, yet who can avoid seeing the source of war and the tyranny of those nations who deprive us of the natural right of trading with our neighbors? Now, what trading were they doing, brothers and sisters? Now, this letter from Thomas Jefferson to George Washington happens to be dated to 1788. As pointed out before, in 1788 is when you go into the matter when Britain was trying to do what some will call piracy regarding the slave ships. They had a thing called the Dolben Act, D-O-L-B-E-N. Now, the Dolben Act shuts down the matter of trying to say that there were no ships. You understand? There were no slave ships. They had to been because there were laws concerning that kind of matter. All right? Jumpstart. When you go in your own time in history, you can look up Nathaniel Gordon, last name Gordon. He was executed by the orders of Lincoln because of slave trading with his ship called the Erie, E-R-I-E. So how then do you have acts, laws? How then do you have documentation about people talking about, such as Alexander Falconbridge, concerning the matter of slave ships, but yet you got people out there saying, because you just love America so much, that you going to sit there and say that, oh, there was no slave ships and we are indigenous to this place here. You make yourself, no disrespect, not trying to play fantasy, you make yourself actually look worse in that, because now you got to sit there and explain how are you not even a survivor in your own particular kingdom, in your own particular timing, in your own particular society. We, the children of Israel, say we come from the land of the east. So if you're saying you indigenous or autochthonous, in other words, coming from no other place, but just solely from this Western hemisphere, then why you argue with us? Our argument as Israelites were more so on the human level, be with the people, both quote Palestinians and Jewish, who are in our land. Your argument, if this is your land, is who you might call the Mongoloid people that are in your land, who were then by some conquered by the Europeans. You got a whole different fight, but yet you take out time to try to go against the house of Israel. You know what it is? That's because everyone else got perhaps their quote, their reparations, and the black man didn't. So now for the money bag, and I hate to have to put it in terms like that, it would be, you know what, we can get ours too. No, you can't pay me for doing what you did. Remember Freddie Gray, the guy that got killed by the police back in Maryland? Anytime, as in the case when his mother took the money, your case doesn't hold in court. You allow them to pay you off. You understand? So these are things, brothers and sisters, that no, we cannot sit there and allow. Let's continue, brothers and sisters, in this. The products of, excuse me, the products of the U.S., the United States, will soon exceed the European demand. What is to be done with the surplus? When there shall be one, it will be employed without question to open by force a market for itself with those placed in the same continent with us, and who wish nothing better. Now, let's remember the North American continent included Florida. Because see, Florida didn't become a state until 1845. And Florida in 1860, 1861 became part of the Confederacy. Louisiana did not become a state until after that particular matter. If I remember right, somewhere in the early 1800s, 1804 or so, in that particular case. Correct me if I'm wrong, Texas did not become a state until 1845. So when you look at that, Texas, Louisiana, and Florida, where the French and the Spaniards were still conducting the slave trade even after the timing of Thomas Jefferson, was never part of the colonies. So when the colonies became the quote United States, and then in 1803, 1804, while they was fighting for freedom in a place of today called Haiti / Santo Domingo, inclusive of the Dominican Republic, because no disrespect, sidebar, a lot of times, and I hate to have to say this, so-called Dominicans don't want to acknowledge the fact of the place being free from the people that's on, brothers and sisters, the west side of that same particular island called Haiti. All right, but let's continue in this particular case right here. Now, you had it to where, brothers and sisters, dealing with the laser pointer, that the North American continent included things of that kind of nature, such as Trinidad, such as Tobago, such as St. Lucia, such as Jamaica. So when we read from Thomas Jefferson in 1788 to George Washington saying this right here, right? It said the products of the U.S. will soon exceed the European demand. What is to be done with the surplus? How are you getting these products? What products do you have? Remember, in the 1830s and the 1840s, after the era of Lincoln, pardon me, before the era of Lincoln, as far as his presidency, because he was born in 1809, but as far as the death of Washington and Jefferson, they were saying, you don't dare make war on cotton. So what was this surplus? What was the business that they were doing? Because those who do know that the people picking the cotton was picked up by the steamships and then shipped over into Europe, shipped over to India of the East. Did you know that? Did you know the cotton that our ancestors picked in the southern United States was shipped to places in East India? When you look into history, what they call the Royal Africa Company, that was established, correct me if I'm wrong, in 1672 regarding the slave trade. That quote-unquote company called the Royal Africa Company was a trade thing that was done with our ancestors. Their major commodity, in many cases, going to Liverpool, which is in England, was the cotton. That is why during the Revolutionary War, for those who do study the history upon it, the fact that America stopped producing the cotton and being sent over there because the slavery rivalry had died down during that time, during that European countries were suffering. The world benefited from our people's plight. Let's continue. It goes on to say this. It will be employed without question to open by force a market for itself with those placed on the same continent with us, and who wish nothing better. Other courses too are obvious, which may involve us in war, and war requires every resource of taxation and credit. The power of making war often prevents it, and in our case would give efficiency, sorry if I mispronounced it, to our desire of peace. If the new government wears the front, which I hope it will, I see no impossibility in the availing ourselves of the wars of others to open the other ports of America to our commerce at the price of our neutrality. So what is he saying in that particular case? In order for us to remain neutral and stay in business, we may just have to sit there and go to war. War is business, brothers and sisters. That's something we wanted to point out. Why did Texas secede from the Union in 1861? Same reason why Mississippi did. They said they want to be able to control the slave trade. You are taking states' rights, the rights of the state to have slaves, essentially. Now, the North was two-faced because you had states on the side of the Union that were still slave states. 4 of them in particular. Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and another one which I forget, pardon me on that. But brothers and sisters, Lincoln had to sit there and make sure regarding the Civil War within the United States, which we're going to touch on in the future, that he did not offend, that he did not make anyone, quote, feel bad. And the last thing on his mind was the benefit of the so-called Negro. Abraham Lincoln was not a black man of today's timing. He being called the N-word does not make him a brother. His wife was white, as was his father-in-law, as was his son. So let's continue in this particular case. Thank you for that. The campaign between the Turks and 2 empires has been clearly a favor of the former. In other words, the Turks was winning. The emperor is secretly trying to bring about a peace. The alliance between England, Prussia, and Holland, and some suspect Sweden also, renders their meditation decisive whenever it is proposed. They seem to interpose it so magistrally, between Denmark and Sweden, that the former submitted to its dictates, and there was all reason to believe that the war in northwestern parts of Europe would be quieted. Why does this become important? Because in Sweden, you had the banks that was holding the money from the revenue of the slave trade, as well as in Switzerland, brothers and sisters. They were all in one shape, form, fashion in cahoots with it. See, when we as a people, and you see this more and more brothers and sisters doing this on the internet, talk about what we've been through as a people, it seems as if nobody else sits there and picks up to want to carry that baton, and we shouldn't have to expect them to. So it's for us to sit there and do that, as pointed out before. Let's continue in that. All right. Thank you for the timing and the fact that you can be anywhere, but you're listening to this either currently live now or later. Thank you for that, family. All of a sudden, a new flame burst out of Poland. The king and his party are devoted to Russia. The opposition rely on the protection of Prussia. They have lately become the majority in the Confederated Diet and have passed a vote for subjecting their army to a commission independent of the king and propose a perpetual diet, in which case he will be a perpetual cipher. Russia declares against such a change in their constitution, and Prussia has put an army into readiness for marching at the moment's warning of the frontiers of Poland. So what are we pointing out? Thomas Jefferson, in this letter, again dated to 1788, is going in this talking about other nations and them going to war and how it will affect the United States. As everyone knows, the United States was built upon slave economy. One of the biggest lies that has been pushed, even sometimes in college, no disrespect to that, is that only 5% of white people own slaves. That's a lie. Only 5%. They wouldn't have a whole big matter of an abolitionist movement for just 5% of the population of the South. They wouldn't have papers such as the Liberator that talk upon such. Frederick Douglass's speech on July the 4th, which he made on July the 5th, would have not made such an impact if he was only talking about 5% of the population. So, brothers and sisters, we do not, while speaking our truth, if it means that we have to be alone and speaking it, then so be it. But don't ever sit there and allow someone to silence you in a lie. Even if you got to sit there and take a breather for a moment. Don't ever allow someone, man or woman, woman or man, to ever sit there and make you think that your truth is invaluable. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. The king and his party are devoted to Russia. The opposition rely on the protection of Prussia. They have lately become the majority in the Confederate Diet and have passed a vote for subjecting their army to a commission independent of the king and propose a perpetual diet, in which case he will be a perpetual cipher. Russia declares against such a change in their constitution, and Prussia has put an army in readiness for marching at a moment's warning in the frontiers of Poland. These events are too recent to see as yet what they turn, to see as yet what turn they will take, or what effort or what effect, I'm totally sorry about that, read a little too fast, they will have on the peace of Europe. So is that also of the lunacy of the King of England, which is a decided fact, notwithstanding all the stuff that the English papers publish about his fevers, his deliriums, etc. The truth is that the lunacy declared itself almost at once, and with as few concomitant complaints as usual attend the first development of that disorder. I suppose a regency will be established, and if it consists of a plurality of members, it probably will be peaceable. What do we want to point out in that? Essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, Jefferson is telling Washington you may have to sit there and play both sides. See what side is going to get stronger. See what side could benefit you more. Know that they are the children of Europeans, so their ruach or their spirit is going to be attached to that one way or the other. You understand? Let's continue. Thank you for the time, family. In this event, it will be much favor the present wishes of this country, which are so decidedly for peace, that they refuse to enter into the mediation between Sweden and Russia. Least you should commit them. As soon as the convocation of the States General was announced, a tranquility took place through the whole kingdom. Happily, no open rupture had taken place in any part of it. The parliaments were reinstated in their functions at the same time. This was all they desired, and they had called for the States General only through fear that the crown should not otherwise be forced to reinstate them. Their end obtained, they began to foresee danger to themselves and the States General. They began to lay the foundations for cavilling at the legality of that body if its measures should be hostile to them. What are we talking about? Jefferson is telling Washington, be careful. because it can go one way or the other. While they're worried about the King of England being a lunatic or something of that nature, and war already being thought to be breaking out within different European countries, the main theme of the letter that Jefferson is sending here in 1788 to Washington is to make sure, mind you, he didn't become president until 1789. That's Washington, that is. Be careful and make sure you choose what will, quote, benefit the states. That is to say, the United States. Let's continue, brothers and sisters. The court, to declare itself of the dispute, convened the notables who had acted with general approbation on a former occasion, and referred to them the forms of calling and organizing the States General. These notables consist principally of nobility and clergy, the few of the tiers, that means that, among them being either parliament men, which is of Europe, which is of England in particular, or other privileged persons. The court wished that in the future States General of the members of the Tiers-Etat should equal those of both the other orders, and that they should form but one house, altogether and vote by persons, not by orders. But the notables, in their true spirit of priests and nobles, combining together against the people, have voted by 5 borough out of 6, that the people or tiers, that's how you mean that, shall have no greater number of deputies, than each of the other orders separately, and that they shall vote by orders, so that 2 orders concurrent in a vote, the third will be overruled. For it is not here as in England, where each of the 3 branches have a negative on the other 2. If this project of theirs succeeds, a combination between the 2 houses of clergy and nobles will render the representation of the tiers that merely nugatory. All right, I'm gonna explain what I'm going through in this in a second. The borough are to assemble together to consolidate their separate votes, but I see no reasonable hope for their change in this. What are we talking about in this case, brothers and sisters? Remain neutral if you can. If you got to go to war, go to war, but only do so to the benefit of our commerce. And when I say our commerce, I'm talking about what Jefferson is saying to Washington. And we already know what their commerce is. See, if these nations were to go to war, who's going to be buying the American products that he talked about earlier as having a surplus? What are you going to do with the surplus? Why does that become important to what we're talking about? In Exodus, did not the Pharaoh fear a war coming, and he said, let's deal wisely with the children of Israel? One of the things that history shows us that Martin Van Buren was about was, what are we going to do with the Negroes if a, quote, civil war were to even break out in the United States? Because they was talking about civil war since the era of 1820. So while Jefferson was still alive, because he passed away in 1826, the United States was already talking about a matter of a civil war. You understand? On the spiritual side, the Creator is giving the children of Israel a reprieve that came through that civil war. So when you find people saying, oh, they didn't fight for the people of slavery, slavery just ended and it didn't start because of it. Those who had, and is not trying to sound deep, the spiritual eye know good and well why the Civil War started. And why all these wars began to have started was in part because of the way they treated the Most High's people. The Most High spoke about blood for blood. The Most High in the book of Isaiah, chapter 60, correct me if I'm wrong, it's there, where he said he will feed the enemies of Israel their own flesh. So when they're going at it against each other, don't sit there and wonder why. You understand? Let's continue, brothers and sisters. All right? Perhaps the king, knowing that he may count on the support of the nation and attach it more closely to him, may take on himself to disregard the opinion of the notables in this instance, and may call an equal representation of the people in which precedence will support him. In every event, I think the present disquiet will end well. The nation has been awakened by our revolution. He's talking about the Revolutionary War against Britain. They feel their strength. They are enlightened. Their lights are spreading, and they will not introgate. Pardon me, and they will not retrograde. Sorry about that. The first States General may establish 3 important points without opposition from the court. 1, their own periodical convocation. 2, their exclusive right of taxation, which has been confessed by the king. 3, the right of registering laws and of previously proposing amendments to them, as the parliaments have by usurpation been in the habit of doing. So what is he saying right here? That the first States General may establish 3 important points without opposition from the court. And one of the things is that their exclusive right of taxation. Did you know that one of the things they worried about during slavery was to whether or not to have representation as 3/5 compromise that came to be? Should the people be taxed, having, quote, slaves as property? So this is how it intertwines with our people, because we was the blood, the backbone, while being stepped on our back and neck of these people. They made laws between themselves and went to war between themselves based on what happened with us. You understand? What I've come to learn during the matter of all that is the amount of infants passing away among the enslavers, the planters as they were called, or the slave masters, was high. Their seed line was not continuing in many, many cases. You understand? And so, besides the people that were lost, that was between teenage years and until their 50s in the Civil War, brothers and sisters, because Abraham Lincoln died at 56, the Civil War was for 4 years, so there were people that were fighting in the Civil War that were in their 50s, right? Believe it or not, when we read eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, don't sit there and think that they were just riding very high and nicely while we were just being enslaved. They were going through it. Not, quote, T-O-O or two, but D-U-E, due to what was being done. The movie Summersby gets into that as well. All right, let's continue. Thank you for that. The court will consent to this form. The court will consent to this from its hatred of the parliaments and from the desire of having to do with one rather than many legislators. If the states are prudent, they will not aim at more than this at first, lest they should shock the dispositions of the court and even alarm the public mind, which must be left to open itself by degrees to successive improvements. These will follow from the nature of things. How far can they proceed in the end toward a thorough reformation of abuse cannot be foreseen. In my opinion, a kind of influence which none of their plans of reform take into account will elude them all. I mean, the influence of women in the government. The manners of the nation allow them to visit alone or persons in office to solicit the affairs of the husband, family, or friends, and their salutations bid defiance to laws and regulations. This obstacle may seem less to those who, like our countrymen, are in the habit of considering right as a barrier against all solicitation, nor can such end one without the evidence of his own eyes believe the desperate state to which things are reduced. in this country from the omnipotence of an influence which, fortunately, of the happiness of the sex itself, meaning the gender itself, does not endeavor to extend itself to our country beyond the domestic line. When I was studying upon and for this presentation, it took me back to what was built and what was established by these people in 1872, Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove is where these politicians go. They say in July, and this was even pointed out by Clinton when he was doing this thing in politics, right? And the homosexuality that is there is known. So now when you find these people wondering about it being a problem for a woman to be with her husband in this particular manner, we can see why that is. Let's continue, brothers and sisters, and close out. All right? Your communications to the courts, pardon me, your communications to the Count de Monstier, that's French, whatever they may have been, cannot have done injury to my endeavors here to open the West Indies to us. On this head, the ministers are invincibly mute, though I have often tried to draw them into the subject. I have therefore found it necessary to let it lie till war or other circumstance may force it on. Whenever they are in war with England, they must open the islands to us, and perhaps during that war they may have some price which might make them agree to keep them always open. In the meantime, I have laid my shoulder to the opening the markets of this country to our produce, and rendering its transportation a nursery of our seamen. A maritime force is the only one by which we can act on Europe. Our navigation law, if it be wise to have any, should be the reverse of that of England. Instead of confining importations to home bottoms or those to the producing nations, I think we should confine exportations to home bottoms, or to those of nations having treaties with us. See the connection? Maritime means of the sea. Seamen, navigation law. Importations and exportations. What are you importing and exporting? The captives and the things that the captives dealt with. In the West Indies, they dealt with indigo. In the West Indies, they dealt with sugarcane. And believe it or not, in some parts of the West Indies, they dealt with cotton. In the United States, or in the colonies proper, they dealt with tobacco. They dealt, brothers and sisters, with cotton. So when you start talking about the seamen and importation and exportations, what are we talking about? The people, as pointed out, that were being shipped from one place to the next, as well as the stuff that they were growing and being made to cut. Let's continue, brothers and sisters. Our exportations are heavy and would nourish a great force of our own, or be a tempting price to the nation to whom we should offer a participation of it in exchange for free access to all possessions. This is an object to which our government alone is adequate in the gross, but I have ventured to pursue it here so far as the consumption of productions by this country extends. This is our arrangement. Relative to tobacco, none can be received here but in French or American bottoms. Who was responsible for dealing with the tobacco? Anybody in the comments? Who was responsible for dealing with the tobacco? Remember who was made to cut it and made to pick it. Remember who were the people being made to work in the tobacco plantations, the cotton plantations. So when we read in this in 1788, brothers and sisters, from Jefferson to Washington, thus in our arrangements relative to tobacco, none can be received here but in French or American bottoms. Meaning, in other words, the bottoms, correct me if I'm wrong, of these ships. This is employment for nearly 2,000 seamen and puts nearly that number of British out of employ. By the arret, ARRET of December 1787, it was provided that our whale oil should not be received here, but in French or American bottoms, and by later regulations, or oils, but those of France and America are excluded. Please, let's not deny about the ships, the maritime, the seamen, and what Jefferson is telling Washington here. This is employment for nearly 2,000 seamen and puts nearly that number of British out of employ. So in other words, remember we speaking earlier about Jefferson in the letter here telling Washington to be what? In so many words of today, biased, two-faced, if you will, acting like you're their friend when really you're not, because remember, they start issues from the Revolutionary War. Let's continue, brothers and sisters. This will put 1,000 English whale vessels immediately out of employ and 150 ever long, and cause so many of French and American into service. Remember, Louisiana and Canada, brothers and sisters, both during the timing of Jefferson and Washington, was dealt with. Well, pardon me, let me correct that. The Louisiana Purchase was after Washington. But Canada, correct me if I'm wrong, became part of the English in 1763, which was during the lifespan of Washington and Jefferson. So the French lost in 1763. So when we start talking about how all of this connects, brothers and sisters, it's talking about and call so many of French and American into service. We have had 6,000 seamen formerly in this business, the whole of whom we have taken likely to lose. The consumption of rice is growing fast in this country. Okay, hold on 1 second. You can go, brothers and sisters, in the museum inside the United States, right? And find who was picking the rice. Who was inside those marshlands growing the rice? Was our ancestors. So let us not begin to sit back and wonder, how does this tie in? You understand? Let us not sit back and wonder how, brothers and sisters, all of this will sit there and correlate. So, family, how's everybody doing? Hopefully everybody is well and will be better. Let us continue, brothers and sisters, in this manner. Thank you for your support. We have passed 6,000 seamen formerly in this business, the whole of whom we have been likely to lose. The consumption of rice is growing fast in this country, and that of Carolina gaining ground on every other kind. Is there not to this day a thing called Carolina rice? In South Carolina, black people were brought there to grow rice. Inside the United States. See, we were their bakers. We were their cattle drivers. We were their tailors. And as brothers been pointing out online, we were the people whom they used in the farms for breeding purposes. Did you know that over 30% of the slave owners were white females? Did you know the original shut the bleep up N-word was not said by sisters, but said to sisters, a white woman? So brothers and sisters, again, this is not to spark anger or anything of that sort, but we just want to get this message out to the people. Let's continue, family, in this particular case. All right. I am of opinion the whole of the Carolina rice can be consumed here. Its transportation employs 2,500 sailors, almost all of them English at present, the rice being deposited at cows and brought from thence here. It would be dangerous to confine this transportation to French and American bottoms the ensuing year, because they will be much engrossed by the transportation of wheat and flour hither, meaning here, and the crop of rice might lie on hand for what of vessels? What vessels? The ships. Let's continue, brothers and sisters. But I see no objections to the extensions of our principle in this article also, beginning with the year 1790. However, because there is a necessity of deciding on this, I hope to be able to consult our new government in person, as I have asked of Congress a leave of absence for 6 months. That is to say, from April to November next. It is necessary for me to pay a short visit to my native country, first to reconduct my family there and place them in the hands of their friends, and secondly, to place my private affairs under certain arrangements. When I left my own house, I expected to be absent but 5 months, and I have been led by efforts to an absence of 5 years. I shall hope, therefore, for the pleasure of personal conferences with Your Excellency on the subject of this letter and others interesting to our country, of getting my own ideas set to rights a communication of yours, and of taking again the tone of sentiment of my own country, which we lose in some degree after a matter, it goes on to say, of certain absence. You know, doubtless, of the death of the Marquis de Chateau. That's what I think that's pronounced as from French. The Marquis de Fayette is out of favor with the court, but high in favor with the nation. I once feared for this personal liberty, but I hope he is on safe ground at present. On the subject of the whale fishery, I enclose you some observations I drew up for the ministry here in order to obtain a correction of their arrest of September last, whereby they had involved our oils with the English in a general exclusion from their ports. They will accordingly correct this, so that our oils will participate with theirs in the monopoly of their markets. There are several things incidentally introduced which do not seem pertinent in the general question. They were rendered necessary by particular circumstances, the explanation of which would add to a letter already too long. I will trespass no further than that to assure you the sentiments of sincere attachment and respect with which I have the honor to be Your Excellency's most obedient humble servant. P.S. The observations enclosed, though printed, have been put out into confidential hands only. See the importance of reading, brothers and sisters. See what they were talking about in the letters. Rice. Who was made to picket? Us. What was the commerce? Us. Carolina was known for their rice. Even to this day, when you go to the supermarket, there's a thing called Carolina rice. We were the ones, brothers and sisters, picking at, brothers and sisters. We were in those marshlands. We were their commerce. These are things, brothers and sisters, we do not care to have it to be forgotten. I appreciate the people taking out their time. I apologize for not knowing how to read French. My fault. I'm open to constructive criticism. I hope and pray that everybody is well and will be better. Come and attend the last free Hebrew class online, November 1st, this coming so-called Wednesday, 2023. There will be a presentation on Hebrew linguistics from the biblical and classical perspective. We ask you to get your pens, pads, paper, and phones ready to take notes. The presentation is to be 3 to 4 hours long. WhatsApp 908-587-4841. Email YYISRAEL22@yahoo.com. Please contact via text or email. Day and Night Publications, brothers and sisters, the website is up for those who are interested, if you will. I do not claim to know everything, and I am open, brothers and sisters, to constructive criticism. That picture you see there is a picture of peace. That's me when I was with my lady inside of a park in Brooklyn, the first year of our union. She has been, brothers and sisters, to me, a source in this matter of presenting, encouraging, and things of that nature, brothers and sisters. And that is something that I do not take for granted, if we will. All right? So, brothers and sisters, we hope and pray that, again, that everybody is well and will be better. We ask you all to subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned. I didn't put it inside the PowerPoint, but tomorrow, most high willing, we're going to have to address why we are Old Testament based. I have many Israelite friends who are deemed messianic. Some have subscribed to the channel. Some have definitely supported in more ways than one. And I have subscribed to their channels and have supported in more ways than one. Nonetheless, brothers and sisters, when Israelites are now teaching, sidebar from the presentation that we went over here in history, right? That the Songs of Solomon have to do with who they call Jesus Christ, that just cannot go unchecked. Songs of Solomon is not about Jesus Christ. Deuteronomy 18 is not about Jesus Christ. We've gone over Isaiah 7. We've gone over Isaiah 9. We've gone over Isaiah 53. And tomorrow or in the morning, Creator willing, when we do our presentation, we do intend to go over other parts of the book of Isaiah. That while calling it the Old Testament as if it's done away with, some have used that same said Old Testament to try to validate the New Testament. Brothers and sisters, before I wrote the book, Egypt Talk and Writing, I had to have some understanding of Egyptian culture, Egyptian history, before I can do such. The theme, when you ask a so-called Old Testament brother or sister, what do you do when you sin? While you're saying that Jesus Christ was, quote, the foreshadow of the things to come, or the shadow of the things to come. The thought of that is that saying the teaching of a Lord and Savior as the son of Miriam or the son of Mary was already in thought since the days of, say, the Old Testament. That is something we care to sit there and talk about in this particular case. So we want to do this. Subscribe to the channel so you can get the information sent to you by subscribing and hitting the bell so when we go live concerning this kind of matter, because we're going to have to speak upon our stance and give an honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator, the Maker of heaven and earth. Shalom. Most High bless.